This story takes place when I was 9 years old. I'm now almost 25. I was at my great-grandfather's house in Idaho over Christmas break, visiting family and everything that comes with it. It was also the first year my mom's boyfriend came along with us, since my parents had divorced that previous summer. My grandpa used to live in a small town on an Indian reservation with around 1,000 people. His house was a modest 2-story home surrounded by a lot of open fields and forest. It was a beautiful property, and I miss it dearly. About a day after we arrived, my aunt, uncle, and cousins who lived in the same town as us back home surprised us by driving 10 hours to come visit. They had told us beforehand that they wouldn't be able to make it because of work, so it was a really nice surprise. It was a great time because back then my cousins and I were really close. One evening, my uncle, my step-aunt, and my cousin who lived right next door to my grandpa all came over to visit with everyone. The adults eventually settled into their own conversations, so me and my cousins, Sam who was 9, Evan who was 12, and Kennedy who was 10, decided to head downstairs to the basement and play our monster game. The way the game worked was that Sam and Evan would be the monsters and hide down in the basement with all the lights completely off. Then Kennedy and I would have to go find them. They would make noises here and there to give us a general idea of where they were without making it too easy. And if we got close enough, they would let out these monster sounds and chase us, and we had to make it back to the top of the stairs, which was our safe zone. Looking back now, it seems kind of silly, but at the time it was genuinely scary, and a whole lot of fun.so. Sam and Evan went downstairs to hide and told us to wait 2 minutes before coming down. Kennedy and I waited upstairs, then headed down to start searching. Kennedy went first. It was completely pitch black down there. The only sources of light were the glow from the pellet stove and the moonlight coming in through the window. Even though we knew it was just our cousins hiding somewhere down there, it was still pretty unsettling just because of how dark and quiet it was. About 5 minutes in, Sam and Evan jumped out and scared us, then chased us back upstairs. We caught our breath and decided to go for another round. That we did the same thing, waited 2 minutes, then headed back down. This time I went first. As we were making our way down, we heard what sounded like Evan or Sam bumping into the wall, which made me flinch. We kept walking, and that's when I noticed a figure standing outside the window. I stopped dead in my tracks and put my hand out to stop Kennedy. She got a little annoyed and said, "Come on, why are you stopping?" I didn't say anything. I just pointed toward the window to show her the figure. Kennedy noticed it too, and she whispered over to Sam and Evan that they needed to stop the game because there was someone standing outside. Surprisingly, Sam actually responded. I figured he would have just tried to keep the game going and stay quiet. He said we were lying and that we were just scared. I started getting frustrated because they wouldn't take us seriously. I told them to seriously look at the window above the TV. That's when we saw Sam and Evan crawl out from underneath the ping pong table my grandpa kept down there, and they looked up toward the window. Evan laughed a little and kind of brushed it off, saying it was probably our Uncle Stan out there having a smoke. I knew it wasn't Uncle Stan though, because he always smoked out on the front porch right next to the front door. I pointed that out, and Sam, sounding pretty annoyed, said it was probably just Grandpa walking around outside checking on the house, since everybody knew he was always inspecting the property for any issues. He told us that if we were that worried about it, we should just go upstairs and check. So I went upstairs, but I played it casual and acted like I was just looking for something. I walked into the living room and did a quiet scan of the room. Every single person I knew was sitting right there in the living room. It wasn't Uncle Stan. It wasn't Grandpa. It wasn't anyone who should have been outside. Everyone was accounted for. My stomach dropped. There was definitely someone out there. I didn't want to tell the adults because I was worried they wouldn't believe me. I went back downstairs shaking and told them that everyone was in the living room, no one was missing, and that there was definitely someone outside. Sam and Evan finally realized this wasn't a joke. Their expressions shifted from dismissive to genuinely scared. Kennedy started to cry a little, and I told her to try and keep it quiet. We all gathered at the top of the stairs trying to figure out what to do. Sam and Evan were throwing out some pretty ridiculous suggestions, like going after the guy, but we still didn't want to involve the adults. So we just stayed put at the top of the stairs for about 5 minutes, and then made our way back down. When we got back downstairs, the figure outside the window was gone. We assumed whoever it was had just moved on. Since none of us were in the mood to keep playing the game, we decided to just play ping pong instead. We flipped the lights on in the basement, and as they came on, we noticed the window was cracked open. I thought to myself, Was that window open this whole time? Then I looked over toward the furniture, and my heart completely sank. There was a man in his mid-40s sitting in one of the sofa chairs, staring directly at us. We were so terrified that none of us could move. We just stood there completely frozen. The man started smiling, and it was the most unsettling smile I had ever seen. He began to slowly stand up, and that's when I yelled, "Run." We all sprinted up the stairs, slammed the basement door behind us, and ran into the living room sobbing, telling our family that there was a man downstairs. One of my uncles, who happened to be a cop, grabbed one of my grandpa's guns and headed straight down to the basement. He came back up a few minutes later and said there was nobody down there. We figured the man had climbed back out the window and taken off. The adults absolutely believed us when we told them what had happened, because outside in the snow there were footprints that led all the way to my grandpa's driveway. Nothing downstairs had been stolen, which was a relief. We were all so shaken up that we just sat with our mom and held on to them for the rest of the night. When it came time for bed, I was still too scared to sleep alone, so I climbed into bed with my mom. My cousins and I never played that game again after that night. My grandpa was pretty upset to find out his windows could apparently be opened from the outside, though he was grateful that none of us kids had been hurt. My grandfather passed away in October of 2017, and I miss him deeply. But ever since that night, I have carried a real fear of basements, even as I've gotten older. To this day, whether it's that basement or any other, going down there alone is something I still can't bring myself to do without feeling that same dread all over again. When I was a kid, I had this irrational fear of our basement, though if I'm being honest, our basement was actually pretty unsettling for a child. It was a fairly large space. There was an L-shaped couch right in the middle that sat in front of a wooden support column, and in front of the couch was this big old box TV we kept down there, which had all of our gaming consoles hooked up to it. The layout of the basement was basically set up in a large circle that wrapped around the couch. There was a booth and table in one corner, an old bar in another corner with a door to the laundry room tucked behind it, and then in the corner closest to the stairs was the doorway leading into my dad's small workout room. My dad rented out the upstairs of the house to an older woman named Ruth, so we only had access to the first floor and the basement. My dad usually hung out in the living room on the first floor, which is why all our video games ended up downstairs on the old TV, since he didn't really spend time down there. I'm the youngest in the family. I have 2 older brothers. I was somewhere between 6 and 8 years old when this happened. My brothers weren't home that day, so they must have been out at friends' places. It was just me and my mom. My dad was most likely at work. Normally I'd be down in the basement playing video games with my brothers, so I wouldn't think twice about it, but being alone down there made me uneasy. I remember feeling a little creeped out as I walked down the stairs. The basement door was also terrible because it wouldn't stay open on its own. It would just slowly swing shut unless you propped something in front of it, which only made me feel more cut off from the rest of the house and from my mom. I was down there playing whatever video games I was into at the time, alone on that gray fluffy couch, and every little sound would make me pause the game and look in whatever direction it came from. There were always strange sounds coming from the laundry room, and even though I had gotten used to them over time, they could still catch me off guard. They were usually familiar sounds though, so when I heard something unusual come from inside the laundry room, I stopped playing. It wasn't the sound of the washing machine or the boiler clacking away. It was the sound of something dropping to the floor and bouncing once or twice. I immediately jumped off the couch and ran upstairs to find my mom, telling her there was someone in the basement, that I remember her being completely calm about it. She asked me what happened, and then reassured me that there was nobody down there. She came back downstairs with me, opened the laundry room door, turned on the light, looked around for a few seconds, then closed it back up and told me there was no one in there. That was enough to settle my nerves, so she headed back upstairs, and I went back to playing my games that I can't remember exactly how much time went by before I eventually went upstairs to grab a snack. My mom was already starting to get dinner ready, and I noticed it had gotten dark outside, which only made the idea of being back in the basement worse. The basement had 2 small windows that let in some natural light during the day, but once night fell it was completely pitch black down there. I did end up going back down anyway, and at some point I heard the heater in the laundry room kick on, except it was unusually loud. I turned around and noticed the laundry room door was now wide open. I got up off the couch and slowly walked toward it. It was completely dark inside. I was too scared to reach in and turn on the light. All I wanted to do was pull the door shut. I worked up just enough courage to make a run at the door, slam it closed, and then bolt back to the couch. For whatever reason, being on the couch just made me feel safer. And strangely, it didn't even cross my mind that it was odd for that door to be open again after my mom had closed it earlier. The next thing I remember is hearing a man's voice coming from somewhere behind me. At first my brain didn't even register what I had just heard. It didn't feel real. I turned around and saw a sickly-looking man sitting in the booth in the corner of the basement, his arm resting on the table and his head propped up on his fist. He said, "My God, how you've grown." I was completely frozen. I couldn't even get a scream out. I just stood there staring at this man in the corner with my mouth hanging open, my whole body locked up. He slowly stood up in this crooked, hunched-over posture and began moving toward me as he said, "Your mother won't let me see you guys." That's when I finally screamed. I turned and ran for the stairs as fast as I could, screaming for my mom the entire way up to the kitchen. I slammed the basement door behind me and locked it, then screamed and cried to my mom that there was a man downstairs. I saw the look on her face, and she was absolutely terrified. She called 911, and strangely I don't have a clear memory of what happened in the moments before the police arrived. I just remember a number of officers showing up and heading down into the basement, that I stayed with my mom and one of the officers in another room while they found him. And the man they found was my uncle. My estranged uncle. My mom's brother, who had essentially been cut off from the entire family because he was a convicted child rapist. Our parents never wanted him anywhere near us, and my mom had no desire for any contact with him whatsoever. He had broken into the house and had been hiding in that basement for who knows how long. I didn't even recognize his face, because the last time I had seen him, I was still a baby, that I haven't seen him since that day. He was sent back to prison for another 4 years after being convicted of yet another sex crime. To this day, we have no idea where he is.